I'm Roniel,
I'm DaRon.
and today we have another juicy computer forensics or digital forensics demonstration. So this one is going to be about system administrator going rogue. And DaRon, I know you've seen a lot of administrators and developers who have went rogue and just took over everything, even probably including bank fraud, and just tore down the company. So this one is going to be very interesting. I hope you guys like it. So I'm going to hand it over to DaRon to actually start the demonstration.
This was an NGO, so it's a nonprofit organization, and their big thing was doing good works actually all around the country. I won't go into it much further than that because obviously I don't want to give away the organization and let them get victimized yet again. But they hired the system administrator, and when they pressured him, actually they wanted some oversight over him. They wanted someone else to watch, and to the very thing that we were discussing from the get-go, watch and make sure that he wasn't up to anything nefarious, because they were actually required to, as part of being a nonprofit, that they got told in an audit, hey, this is something you have to do. You need to make sure that your system administrator is monitored. You need to have some kind of auditing mechanisms. The guy he pulled the whole, oh, you guys don't trust me bit and quit over it. Dead silence for about 6 months. And then all of a sudden, they start getting these notices that, and when I say they, I mean the company and people within the company and people who had volunteered and people who had even submitted an application to the organization. We're getting all these notices about credit cards and various loans that they had taken out not being paid, and their bank accounts were all getting drained, and I mean drained. So what had wound up happening is their system was using Azure, so they were using Office 365, they were using everything that came with that, OneDrive, SharePoint, etc., etc. So everything was managed through there. They had servers of their own, they had their own internal network, but they'd pushed a lot of this stuff into the cloud. And what we're actually staring at right now are logs from Azure, from Office 365. And I want to start here for one quick and simple reason. You'll notice how we see the date. We've got the user, we have the action, and then we have this JSON. When we get something like this, if you're talking Google, so if you're using any of the Google Cloud services, or if you're using Azure, if you're using AWS as well, you oftentimes get Excel or you get CSV formats. And in either case, you have to do something with that data. I will tell you, at some point, we'll look at some logs from Google, not in this episode, but in a future episode, so you can see the difference between them. When you look at the Google logs, their exports, the log exports, are nowhere near as mature as what you'll get from Microsoft. It's going to be all over the place. Honestly, it looks a lot like if you look straight at logs from Plazio or something like that, where there are no such thing as set columns. And they have JSON, but it's not properly quoted. So in a CSV, that means you'll just get random columns. It's not a mature reporting system. Their user interface is phenomenal. Their exports are just terrible. Unfortunately, exports are what we wind up having to use, obviously, when we are including stuff into our reports. Looking at this, I'll show you one real quick easy way though to parse this JSON. This is a quick tip and cheat. So if we go to the data tab, we can say get data. And in this case, I want to get it from this whole table. It's going to automatically pull everything here. I say, okay. Now, from this pop-up, it's quite simple. I have to tell it that this data, all the data in this row is JSON. And the way I do that is I go to format, and then I'm going to say parse a JSON. So it's parsed all that JSON, and when I click here, now I get to select my rows. I will tell you, you don't want all of this. The vast majority of the data from Azure is great, but not useful. At least not for the purposes of what we're showing today or usually. So I'm going to want the client IP address. We could go through and do the actor IP address, but you're going to see that by and large is the same as the client IP address. We can do the event type, source URL, site URL, source file extension. I'm going to do the source file name. And then let's also go with target. Actually usually winds up being list, and it's not very useful. And we can do results. Yeah, we'll go with the result status. We can actually add more after the fact if for whatever reason we don't like what we happen to have. But we'll say okay, just so you can see real quickly what all's here. Now when you're done with this, you just close and load. It's going to actually open up a new tab right here based on that data. Now I've got that sorting and filtering that I had before. One of the things we see this guy really quickly just launch into is he's trying to find all files with sensitive data. So you're looking at him just pulling a massive amount of information, and you'll notice he's actually logged in as a valid user. So his credentials at this point had already been disabled. Here is why you never tell a system administrator your credentials. This right here. Had he not known the credentials of a gentleman who actually happened to be out on medical leave, so the guy didn't even know what was going on, wouldn't have had a clue anyway. So any email notices that he may have gotten would have been moot. But more importantly, the email notices he would have gotten would have been accessible to the attacker. This is similar to what I'm sure you remember, Roniel, we saw with the compromise of that smartphone, where once they're in complete control of the system, they're able to shut off notifications. They're able to delete the notifications before you get them. Just a whole host of stuff. That's actually what he wound up doing. Later on, he shuts off all the notifications to everyone. What he also did was he rerouted all phone calls to this organization to him. And yeah, I mean, he went hardcore because the phones were actually via voice over IP. So they had one of those big time voice over IP providers. So it was, you'll hear them called soft phones. Basically, it's just instead of having an actual telephone, I take the calls on my computer, all that good stuff. So he had their Teams, he had their phone system, he had their email, he had OneDrive, so all their OneDrive data, and that's actually what we see him going through right now. And all their SharePoint data, he had everything. And at this point, he then started locking everyone out. He locked them out of their phone system, for example, by changing all the credentials, changing the billing address, changing the responsible name, so that they couldn't even get back into their own phone system. I mean, talk about cruel. But
so
please
go ahead. So I was going to say, this is not the one guy that got sent to jail and got back out and tried the same thing. Is this him?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, because I was going to ask, the great thing I know everybody's going to wait for is how he got caught. But since this is a guy that I remember having a conversation about, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to spoil it. No spoiler alert. Keep going.
All right. So one of the things we will quickly notice is some of these IPs I've blocked out. That's because these are his actual IP addresses. And you may sit there and ask yourself, well, why didn't I block out the rest? And the answer is what he was doing was actually, I'm reticent to say this, but what he was doing was actually smart in the beginning, sort of. He didn't do it well and he didn't do it right. When he was doing all of this, he did it all either from anonymous VPNs or from public wireless at hotels and restaurants. So he would go to a hotel, he'd sit in the parking lot, and he's just doing everything from their public wireless. Now, mistake that he made repeatedly is he would stop doing his activities but leave his browser open. And because he left his browser open, it would ping. And it would ping from his actual IP address. It would ping from his cell phone. Some of this he did on his cell phone. Some of this he did on a laptop. And so you'd see this mixture of his cell phone and you'd see his laptop just occasionally pinging from his mobile phone tether or from his mobile hotspot and things of that nature. But when he was using the anonymizers, obviously, well, that wasn't a problem. Just he didn't always close the browsers, or he didn't close OneDrive, and he didn't close this, he didn't close that. And by doing that, we were actually able to tie it to him, because prior to that, so he took out a bunch of bank loans, for example, and credit cards. And we got the records from the police, from the banks, through the police, I should say. And all of that was through anonymizers. And the police were like, well, there's nothing we can do here. You know, we can't just randomly search someone's place just because you suspect it's that particular individual. And see here, what he's accessing are things like their bank information. And then he's going through their credit card renewal notice. He's going through people's bank statements that they happen to have on the... Now, remember, this is an NGO, so they've got a lot of data. They have donors, and he actually goes through the donor roles. Someone had a file full of passwords. Actually, multiple people had files full of passwords, just regular Word docs. And you see him just checking out the files and then downloading the actual files. And he's going through everything. He's going through the medical data. You can see him go take a peek at these W-2s. This is how he got people's social security numbers. He was looking at people's resumes. He started grabbing anything and everything toward the end of it that he absolutely positively could.
So I have a question. I wanted to ask, just to stop for a moment to talk about, since some of the mistakes he made. Now, this is not, and by no means are we telling people how or what to do. But my question is, why do you think this person, whether he was noob or not, he seemed to know a little something, doesn't mean he was good at it. But why do you think he didn't take the time? First, you go to a hotel, right? You do that step, and you maybe, I don't know if he went from a hotel farther away from where he lived, but say he went to this hotel, all right? Why didn't he go into the normal process most people would normally do by getting on their IP address, getting maybe using Bitcoin to get a virtual private server somewhere outside of the country, then go from there to do at the jump box, and then start attacking, or when he got into another machine, use that machine to attack from? Why didn't he use the old method, or did he not really, do you think he didn't understand and he kind of was just jumping ahead of the gun without actually planning?
So one of the most common things that you're going to find with any criminal, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about, big spooky organized crime, or if you're talking about some lone gun who decides to go rob a bank, etc., is for all the brains they have, and some are relatively smart, not smart enough to not get caught, not smart enough to put their talent to good use. Eventually people get lazy, or they know enough to be dangerous, but they don't know enough to be good. And that's really the case here. This guy, he knew enough to be dangerous, but he didn't know enough, for example, to realize that he was no longer on that VPN, which he thought he was on at this point. And so he's doing his thing quite out in the open using his AT&T mobile IP address, and he doesn't realize he's not connected because he didn't check. And that sloppiness is what winds up getting people more often than not, just being sloppy. If he had not been sloppy, I kid you not, so it would have been really hard to sit there and show that it was him. They suspected it was him from the get-go, but I mean, you can't just go based on suspicion. This isn't the movies.
And that's crazy because, I mean, there are ways around going to doing it from the phone, and I wouldn't have done it the way he did it. But I'm saying that wouldn't have been my first thought, is to do it on the phone anyway, knowing some of the issues that you could have and things you need to check. So that's why I didn't, I was kind of wondering, like, there are proven things that people have done in the past, and even old techniques that, that would have been better to use. Not saying that, and again, we're not saying that you should do this. We're not saying people should, but these are proven techniques that people have used, and ways to get around that. And it's just like, okay, like you said, people are lazy, and I just don't understand. If you're going to do, if you're going to set up and do something malicious, wouldn't you think you would plan out everything, test everything? It may not be exactly like this, but test and see if is your data leaking. Like why wouldn't you go through doing these different things? You see this all the time, or you've heard about people doing it. Not that they don't eventually get caught because they get lazy, but why would you go through all this trouble just to go to jail and not actually do your proper due diligence on making sure that you're anonymous? And I don't like anonymizers either, so I don't understand why he didn't go through like what I just said. That would have been a lot better than what he just did.
Right. Yes, you are spot on. He wound up, I guess we should be happy and thankful that he didn't know enough.
No. Yeah, no, I'm happy that he didn't. It's just, we see this a lot, and I just kind of wonder, like, why? Like, I would prefer not to do it at all. Because you're going to get caught, and as you said, he started out great, and then it's kind of like, what the hell, dude? Like, what were you doing? Like, from an attacker standpoint, from a penetration tester or somebody, you think like, okay, you have to think like these people. Like, is that how you would have done it? No.
Right.
But from the defender or the person's trying to catch the person, you're like, yeah, like they screwed up. Thank God we got this guy, and he didn't know enough to be dangerous, because all of these people suffered from this guy's actions.
Yes. And it was a lot of people. Unfortunately, a number of people had their passwords stored in OneDrive. I don't know why.
And they didn't have any security awareness at this company.
No, they didn't. Well, so we see here, just to further the point, he's going through and he's actually grabbing the voicemails and then deleting the voicemails as he changes everything. And as he calls up these banks, and he can give the banks actual valid data. So he's giving them these people's social security numbers. He's giving them the work phone number, which he has taken over. He's giving them the work emails, which he's taken over, because here's another unfortunate thing about this. User one actually had administrative access in Azure. So, he had the keys to the kingdom as far as their Office 365 was concerned, as a direct result. And that's why you also don't see him escalate to another user very much. He does sign in as another user occasionally. We can see he signs in as 3 separate users at at various points, and he also makes it so that he can grab these files anonymously. So some of these files, he actually changed the permissions so that he could just grab them without being authenticated. We see just a number of different IP addresses that were in use. And some of those, again, were local, and so I made it so you couldn't see what they were. And some were the motel and hotel. But most of the IPs involved were these anonymizers. And most of the files that he was going after, I mean, he was going after anything and everything. And you'll see like email signatures. He was taking the templates for how the letterhead was, how the emails were. And then using all that, he also managed to find some canceled checks. And he used those canceled checks. We can see, again, I mean, he's taking anything that he can then use to fake that he's these poor victims, because it wasn't just the company he wanted, and it wasn't just the company he went after. And this guy's actually a professional identity thief. Anyway, he's been put in jail for this.
You really call him a professional identity? Because he doesn't seem like a professional at all.
Professional from the standpoint of he's done time for this thing before.
Okay. So he's an idiot. He's an idiot identity thief.
Yes, by profession. Okay, here's the worst part. But before you sit there and you're like, oh man, this poor company, this poor organization, not only did he go after everyone involved with this company, but as he felt everything close in on him, he started stealing the identity of his own kids.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell is wrong with this guy?
And they gave him up fast as a direct result. So we see here he's using those anonymous links, and we can see it was him because he was just logged in with that same IP address that's anonymized. And he was doing this so he could grab the different files that he wanted, the different files that he needed without being logged in. Because one of the big things you'll hear everyone talk about, oh, well, attackers want to maintain access. And he did go to great lengths to maintain access. Like I said, he made it so that they couldn't even reset their credentials because they couldn't use the phone system. He locked them out of that. They couldn't use the email. He locked them out of that. He changed the credentials on the accounts that he had, and you'll see he took over different accounts and locked them out of the different administrator accounts. What he didn't know was there was one more administrative account. They got lucky. There was one more administrative account that he wasn't aware of that they were then able to use to shut him out of everything and shut everything down. Now, here's the thing about a compromise like this. And I've actually had to deal with a number of these. The first thing organizations tell me when all is said and done, after we've stopped the bleeding, the hemorrhaging, meaning you've taken control back, at least to some degree, they ask, okay, well, what do I do now? What do I do with all this data? And I have to tell them, as we saw above, I mean, this guy was pushing files and deleting files. Okay. Everything on this system has been completely, utterly, totally compromised, and you can't trust it. You can't even trust that he didn't sit there and backdoor something. And the worst part is, since you're talking OneDrive in this case, and SharePoint, etc., if he pushed a malicious file, you may not know that file's malicious. And that file may be a Trojan horse. That file may have malware on it. So it's not that they necessarily have to start from scratch, but this is why you have to back up your online environment. This is why you have to ensure tight controls. This is why you don't give people your credentials. This is why you can't just trust your administrators carte blanche. I mean, look, I worked at Booz Allen at the time of Snowden. I did work for Booz Allen afterward while Snowden was rampaging and doing his thing. And I was in a lot of rooms having a lot of uncomfortable conversations about Booz Allen employees and their trustworthiness. The government had made the mistake of giving contractors way too much power. The same thing is the case here. But almost everyone makes the mistake of making your system administrators too powerful. And a lot of people make the mistake of telling the system administrator their credentials. Hey, I'm having such and such problem. Oh, just, what's your password so I can log in as you and try it out? No, they're an administrator. They don't need your password to do that. I can do that without your permission, but not logging in as you. What I wind up doing is something similar where it's like I'm logged in as you, but I'm still logged in as me. It gets logged to the system in that way, which is important for oversight purposes, so that I can sit there and say, are my system administrators abusing their rights and permissions? Yes or no. But when you're giving someone your credentials, I don't care how trustworthy you think they are, all of that goes to hell. Non-repudiation, out the door. And more importantly, if that administrator has a fallout with you or with the organization, you very well could become a victim. And
also,
please,
it's best not to store all of your data in one place.
Yes.
And then passwords in there. Like they have a lot of data, and I know, and I don't like data being in the cloud, but passwords and stuff like that. And them not, I'm assuming they didn't have a security team, and I'm assuming that there was no security awareness, like we said.
Correct.
But having that all stored there, even if he didn't get any password from another user, that he could have got it exactly from there if he had got, checked that out beforehand and was just looking around, keeping around and stuff. But there are people I know that literally go through things and they creep around things. That's why at my last company a while ago, I used to have to set up things to see who was looking at what. And those were planted specifically in those different folders as honeypots or different things like that to see who was reading data they shouldn't be. So
right.
We had that happen a lot. But, again, if you guys do not have a security team, this is why it is best to get a security team and have security awareness at your companies.
Exactly. You're exactly right. And definitely don't have things like your tax data on there. They had their tax data. They had files with credentials. They had files with physical signatures on it. They had canceled checks. They had a whole host of stuff. And he actually was making actual checks and cashing them at banks. I mean, just all kinds of crazy stuff. This is ridiculously sensitive data that he had access to because he had administrative rights when he broke into the system. I mean, and it's hard to take control back. You'll see in the end, this was the very last bit of it, when he got shut out right here. And this is, of course, all anonymized. So he gets shut out and he's trying all the different credentials that he knew. And then he tried another set of failovers that he had after resetting credentials again. And then he had to get shut out again. And you see him again try. It was difficult for the organization to track down all of the credentials that he wound up having throughout this whole thing. And there's no way they're getting all the data back. So he was caught. And the man is serving time again. But that doesn't mean you get the data back. And the damage done to the credit of the organization and to the credit of the volunteers, the employees, and the people who had worked for this company, I mean, that's years. Identity theft is really painful. But mixed in with this was an interesting case only from the perspective of it was an administrator who went rogue. And when he went rogue, it was identity theft, it was bank fraud, it was wire fraud. He went through computer fraud and abuse. And And it's unusual for someone to go that hog wild. But it does happen. Usually it's a little more targeted.
It's it's unusual, but I've seen it happen a lot. And again, it's from companies giving their system admins, even network admins, too much, privileges, too much rights, and to the system. And there's no role-based structure or separative duties, as we said, a separation of duties at the company. This is a good demonstration of why you shouldn't have, you should not have your administrators have God rights.
Yes.
All right. They should all have separation of duties and doing different things. And if they're going to own, it's like if I own access or I'm responsible for accessing the server or so, and this is my control, then that's what they have access to, and that's it. And everybody usually has a different portion, but like I said, a lot of companies don't do that nowadays. So haven't seen it as much lately, but maybe because people are getting better, maybe not. But again, what we want you to take away from this is separation of duties.
Yep. Separation of duties, making sure that you don't tell people credentials, watch the watchers. And I've mentioned to you, I've had instances where actually incident response went rogue and started monitoring people.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to watch the watchers. Always. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, and don't store your passwords on the cloud.
Yeah.
Don't store that stuff. Like, don't give nobody your password. Don't store it, and you'll be at a better standpoint than where this company was at. But other than that, I'm glad the guy was caught. Hopefully, he won't be out doing this again soon. And if he does get out, where he'll be right back in there again because they're definitely going to come back to you.
That's a lesson.
If you don't want, and I think this guy is a guy that wanted to figure out how you did so he can be better at it, right? So all you attackers out there, the hacker hunter right there, if you don't want the hacker hunter to come see you or find you, don't do the crime. And until then, this is our episode. I am Roniel.
I'm DaRon.
And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. And if you have anything you would like us to discuss in the future, please let us know down in the comment section, email us. And if you would like to sponsor us, please, we would love it. As you can see, I would need some GoFundMe donations for my trash bag paper here. So if you would like to fund us and the fund or GoFundMe for Roniel campaign, then please feel free. Or if you'd like to fund us to get Dan or DaRon out of the Batcave and into a studio area, please let us know. And we would definitely appreciate it. Until then, later.
Have fun.
Can you zoom in a little bit? I don't know how it may be.
Okay. For those of you who are blind like Roniel.
Hey, I wear glasses as well, but hey, I don't know if the viewers can see all of this.
Oh, you know what? The viewers can see everything. You're just blind.
Just blame it on me.
Yeah, don't blame the viewers for the fact that you're blind.
Well, how about I blame it on the platform we're using and say that it's hard for me to see from that distance, and you got it right on your machine.
You're the one with the trash bag on your window.
Hey, if you guys would like to go fund Roniel, please go fund me so that I can get rid of the trash bag paper. And maybe I can get something better to cover up or get maybe a better area space. Or maybe when Roniel comes out of his bat cave, we can actually have a spot where a studio where we can do all of our stuff at. So you guys want to go fund me? The link will be down in the description.
Have we given up on our sponsors? Our numerous sponsors?
That is crazy, man. I remember this one guy. I heard about this one guy. He was a developer and he kind of had built some malware. He wanted to seem so hackery, and he was doing all kind of crazy stuff when he left. He was so pissed off at the company I worked at. And it's not uncommon. This is why we say do not give your admins, or don't give everybody, developers, admins, or whatever. They shouldn't have God writes to everything. Oh, and if you guys want to sponsor us, any water people want to sponsor us, even though this is from great value. I'm sorry, I'm being cheap today. Got great value water, so it's still pretty good. It's purified water. So great value. Please come sponsor us. Anybody else that wants to sponsor us, we'll happily appreciate it. Those donations could go to either better trash bag paper, or it can go to better studio equipment or equipment in general. So yes, if you want to go fund us, or if you want to sponsor us, please do so. The link will be down in the description.
Hopefully, the trash bag isn't some kind of symbolism for our content or the water.
Oh man, are you saying our stuff is trash? If not, I can go put unicorns and ponies on there, and maybe that'll make it even better, and that'll make our content unicorn and pony friendly with the trash.
That's how we get those bronies, you know?
Hey, yeah, and if you guys haven't already, go check out our last episode, or the episode before then, where I have to use a unicorn on my head. Thank you, DaRon, for putting me as a unicorn. There's a really good reason why there's a unicorn there, and maybe in another episode we'll talk about what the whole unicorn thing means and whether it's a good or bad thing. But anyway, back to our scheduled programming.